Good evening. This is Community Unity Now. And this is Bill Morton, my co-host. He's the president of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce. And I am Trudy Leong, administrator of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce. This is the D Tycoon Show, Community Unity Now. And our guest today, our very, very special guest, is musician Robert Irving III. He's a producer, everything with music, everything with art, and he does so much for youth and the arts in the community. So welcome, Robert. How are you today?
I'm great, and thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us.
So nice to see you here. Welcome.
Yes.
Well, first of all, can you tell us about how you formed the Sonic Portraits Orchestra Youth Ensemble?
Recording in progress.
And your mission for the ensemble?
Well, that's a great question. So, I guess the Sonic Portraits Orchestra itself, it was formed in 2009, and because I was doing at that time a commission piece called Sketches of Brazil at Millennium Park. And that performance particularly had a lot of seasoned players, from Grand Park Symphony Orchestra, the CSO, the Sinfonietta, Illinois Philharmonic, and then there were jazz musicians juxtaposed with them, and a lot of more of the seasoned musicians like Steve Barry, the trombonist, and then the next generation of the young lions, Corey Wilkes at that time, he was a lot younger. Norman Palm Jr., Wallace Roney was the featured trumpet player, and Fareed Haq was the featured guitarist, and it was in tribute to Miles Davis, of course. But when I contemplated the formation of the orchestra, I absolutely had in mind to include and intersperse young people within the orchestra. And you asked about the mission. I have the mission statement of the orchestra, and it may be useful just to read it. It says that the mission of SBO is to inspire transformation and regeneration of the collective human potential, goodwill, understanding, and appreciation of our diverse cultures and musical forms. And Sonic Portraits Orchestra performances propagate the historical, folkloric, and cultural nuances of various people and movements through the convergence of their music and art. The orchestra facilitates the creation and performance of music which celebrates the colors, shadings, sounds, and forms of our uniqueness and similarities. And it acts as a sounding board to convey pictures we can hear. It tells stories with sound that recalibrate and renew our collective memory. The SPO was formed to support the creation and performance of multimedia orchestra performing that fosters meaningful social connectivity and collaboration among professional musicians from the seemingly disparate worlds of jazz and classical music. So you have players of various ethnicity and musical orientation that collaborate in active engagement of a wide array of multicultural audiences. And its mission and makeup, the SPO seeks to exemplify peaceful coexistence and creative cooperation, and also to support burgeoning young musicians. And additionally, there is an engagement of and collaboration with students from various interdisciplinary arts to achieve and document programs and performances. And the students are active apprentices as they build their resume and experience alongside of the seasoned professionals. Mm-hmm. So at that time, again, there was an intent to include the youth. However, in the interim, the work of the orchestra was mostly studio based. In other words, I was affiliated with various projects, which I can talk about later. One with a label in North Carolina now, where I was doing orchestral sweetening on these projects. It was Omnific Music, actually founded by my brother in North Carolina. And then there was another record label, Neo Gospel Music Group, and of course Sonic Portraits Jazz, the label, and so all of those gave opportunities for young people to come and perform and play and record in those sessions, so that to actually be employed in the recording of new music, alongside again of professionals. And one of my goals was over time for those young people that were sort of interspersed in there to eventually come together with a youth ensemble. And so that didn't happen until about 2018, when I was doing the Sound Pictures of a Century, the living legacy of Timuel Black, as a commission piece. Mm-hmm. We did it, and so I brought in some youth, just a few, but then the next year we produced an event at IIT that basically had I'd say 95% youth orchestra, which was my goal the whole time. And the way it came about is, of course, I reached back for those young players that I knew and had already worked with or had mentored with the Jazz Institute. But there were a lot of young players who were part of the Jazz Institute satellite programs. And so I wasn't aware of a number of them because they played in different ensembles with members of the Jazz Institute. And so I contacted John Foster of the Jazz Institute, and he was actually a student that I mentored myself when I was producing the album for the Jazz Institute back in, I think, 2004. And I asked him, I said, so I was going after specific instrumentalists. And so he did recommendations, he made calls. So there was this collaboration between the Jazz Institute and the Sonic Portraits Orchestra to find the right fit for the organization. And he made some really great recommendations. And so can I name some names of some of the young people?
Oh, yes, by all means.
Yeah, so Alejandro Salazar was the drummer, and Mikai Collier, who came out of the Jazz Institute program, mm-hmm. Hana Fujisaki, who's a Japanese pianist, who was a graduate student, but who I sort of brought into the Jazz Institute, and I think she lived in Rogers Park for a short time as well. On organ and keyboard, there was Aliyah Hetherington, the young woman who I had mentored in the Jazz Institute and who is now doing more classical music. Jackson Shepard on guitar, really great guitarist, really just came in there and just did a fine job. And on woodwinds, a young lady whose family is actually from Poland, Jenna Prasesa. And then I had some more of the seasoned musicians, just a couple. This time there was Rajiv Halim, of course, on saxophone, and Corey Wilkes again on trumpet, because I felt it was important to juxtapose them again with the youth, or the youth with the seasoned musicians. Also, there was Joshua Moon, the classical piano prodigy, and there were others, but that's basically how the youth orchestra first came together.
Mm-hmm. It seems as if you're trying to give opportunity to the youth to work in the music industry and work with the seasoned artists. But it seems also a very important part of it is you're trying to bring the two generations together so that the youth could learn. But you want to give the youth that solid connection with the generationally. I think I made a new word here.
Absolutely. That's true. Well, that's important, of course. I mean, our culture doesn't tend to venerate the elders as much as say the African cultures and Asian cultures, where over there you don't see nursing homes. Because the elders are respected and mainly for their for their wisdom and knowledge and years. I remember a book of Water and the Spirit by Malidoma Patrice Somé, and I was so impressed with the idea that the youth were not raised by their parents, but instead by their grandparents, because the idea was that the grandparents had a lot more experience, and so the kids were able to benefit from that experience, while their parents were still learning and growing and having new experiences. And so in the orchestra, and with the Jazz Institute, with the mentoring sessions, we focus on that generational connection, and we learn from them too. So it's a great exchange.
So it sounds like with your mission statement of Sonic Portraits Orchestra Youth Ensemble, you cover social justice, diversity, collaboration, arts, community, education, and collective human potential.
Absolutely.
You're covering all the bases of social justice.
Yes, indeed. The West African philosopher Naba Moridenbeek, and he actually lived in Rogers Park for a number of years. He founded the Earth Center there, and he talked about how a flower or a rose was not separated from the scent that it emitted, and so that there was a physical connection between the flower and the scent of the flower. And so that's a great analogy in terms of the kind of meaningful interactions and exchanges that I personally have with the creators of many genres of jazz, like Miles and Dizzy Gillespie and Gil Evans and Wayne Shorter, Chick Corea, Joe Zawinu, who I had a lot of interaction with, and even drummers, not just pianists or composers, but Tony Allen. My son is on an album right now with Tony Allen, the great Afrobeat drummer. Dudu Ndiaye Rose, who was just a dynamic, he wrote the Senegalese national anthem. And we did workshops in Africa and in France together. Polish trumpeter, Thomas Stanko, and of course Donald Byrd, and on and on and on. And so my having worked with them or them having mentored me connects me to their lineages energetically and directly. And so these lineages also include those who they work with. So they planted seeds in me that continue to produce value even today. And so when I take on the responsibility, or as I say, the ability to respond, to pass that on to the next generation, then literally and figuratively, those students of mine become a part of those same lineages. And so again, the sequence of events, you have Miles Davis being mentored by Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, who created bebop. And then Miles instinctively fulfilled his obligation, I believe, to mentor me. And perhaps maybe he knew that because of my nature that I would likewise mentor the next generation of musicians and music creators, producers, interdisciplinary artists, as Miles himself was an interdisciplinary artist, being a painter as well as a composer and a gourmet cook as well.
Yeah, you're such a talented musician and artist and composer and lyricist as well. Is it because of that connection that you could feel between like the scent and the flower? And if that is so, do you still remember what point it was when you had that epiphany that you had to you had to see that connection, feel that connection in order to make your art so great, because you do have excellent art.
Yeah, wow. Thank you. I think there was not a singular event it was quite cumulative in the sense that I took bits and pieces here and there, and as I say, each of those events were like seeds being planted, and then before you know it, the seeds become a tree, and the trees become a forest, and and then you have all of this diversity and selectivity, and so for me, because I was trained in as a musician in terms of the technical aspects of music, that was not a question. I knew I had that, but then one day, Miles told me not to play a note unless you really hear it, and that you really feel it. And so he was asking for, I guess, a authenticity and integrity in the expressionism. And so I sought to go deep inside and really express that which I feel on a deep level and which had meaning, and then to convey that meaning. And it just so happens that when you do that and you go that deep, as we say, what comes from the heart reaches the heart. And so I think people who feel and respond to that is because it's from a pure place, and that reflects the purity that's in them. So it's this harmonic resonance that happens, just like a guitar string. If you play a guitar string and there's another guitar next to it, then the same string, the same note is going to resonate on the other guitar sympathetically. So there's that resonance, that frequency that I think is in us all. And so it's just a matter of how do we reach that. If I may interject, there was a book, I think The Power of Music by Eniar Ozar Khan, and he talks about the musicians in his culture being the priest, but their number one job was not anything except to go around the villages and make sure all of the instruments were in tune. Because if the instruments got out of tune, then that would become reflective in society. So I love that story and that analogy.
I recently spoke with Annabella Gill, and she said that you work so hard. You're always working. Since you just mentioned that you, like when Miles Davis said that don't play a note unless you feel it. Is it that you work so hard because you feel so much? Because we see in your work with the lyrics that you create for social justice, you see a lot of you see the truth. Is it that you have to work so hard because you see so much and you try to express it, but you just don't have enough time in the day to express all that you feel?
Yeah, that's a really good observation, because anything that is of value takes time. And again, going back to the analogy of planting seeds, we plant a seed and it's not going to come up tomorrow. It's not going to come up in a week, but it requires a lot of nurturing. And so I have to develop a lot of patience and trust the process, and, because everything is a process and a building process. So, when I have a new idea, it could take an hour for me to have a good basic demo of it. A lot of music will come in dreams, for example, or concepts or ideas. Or when I'm doing things that are completely unrelated to music, I'll hear a lyrical phrase that relates to a concept. And then I'll take the time to develop a skeleton framework of that as a demo. It's just right here on this little computer over here that's behind me, and a little keyboard, which I have a whole palette of orchestral sounds that I can do, drum sounds. I become the drummer, the bass player, and the horn players. And I try to, again, listen to the inner ear, and when I know what the vocalist is going to do, then I try to cushion and support the vocalist, embrace the vocals in the music. so that it's supportive. And so there's not ever any two things happening at once, that everything has its space. And even when mixing, everything has its individual space that doesn't encroach on another instrument. And so that there's this idea of coexistence that I talk about in the mission statement that even extends to the creation of the music, so that every note has its coexistence with other notes and blending. And so that order and that harmony is then felt when the music is heard, and so it becomes a real immersion into a vibrational field, as it were.
You know, one time, it was like summertime, it was like a couple years ago, and it was a northbound 190 bus from like Michigan Avenue, and you were sitting across from me. And it was,
oh, wow.
And it was like one of those extendy, flexi buses. And I wanted to come up and say hello, because we haven't seen each other in years.
Yeah.
But you were really like deep in thought or something. I was wondering about your creative process. Like when it hits you, does it hit you on the bus? And how do you capture? Do you write it? Do you think it? Do you record it with a little tape recorder? Or what do you do?
So if I'm on somewhere like on the bus and I know that I can't easily record it or get off the bus, unless I get off the bus and then do it. But what I'll do is it's the same thing that I do if I wake up from a dream, and in the dream there was music playing in the dream. Literally, it could be playing on the radio, or it could be coming from a tree, it could be coming from the water, sound of the water. So the challenge then becomes to try to capture the essence of it. You might not capture the whole thing, but so what I'll do is I'll notate the music in my head in terms of the rhythm, and it's a good practice of that, because then that gives me, it's sort of like tactile memory, but reversed to the brain. So with tactile memory, when you do it over and over and over again, it just, your fingers remember it. Your brain doesn't have to remember it. So I will visually envision the notes and the rhythm on paper, so that then it becomes impressed, into my psyche, and so that I don't have to depend on my memory for the specifics of the music in terms of hearing or oral. I can then rely on the impression of the physical notation.
And they say learning is repetition, and you're talking about muscle memory, and just to kind of remember what your creative process was if you don't have a piece of paper in front of you.
Yes. Yeah, so that's the process for me. And the other part of it is that there's the creative part of it that's inspirational, that can come from inspiration, that just hits you all of a sudden. But then there's the craft part of it, and so that's where you kind of got to go to your skill set in terms of notation and being able to transcribe, as it were, those ideas onto paper. But the paper is here initially, and so then I can remember that series of notes, because I remember that the first three notes are 16th notes that start on the third beat, so I get those point of references that help sort of lock me, take me back to the original intent. And so in music there's rhythm and there's melody, and so of course melody is, you could say that there are a finite amount of melodies, but there are an infinite amount of rhythms. The rhythm is so vast, just so vast. And so when you juxtapose the two, then you get on the piano, you get a pattern. You actually see a shape. So you play a chord and it's a shape. And so when you look at it on paper, also it's a shape. And so then when you start to correlate those, then it's all the same thing, you know. So it doesn't matter if I record it, if I remember it or anything. I just remember the shape.
Wow. You mentioned earlier that when you're working with a vocalist, then you couch the vocalist vocals with the instruments. So when you're working with the youth in audience development and also job opportunities, do you instinctively use the same kind of protocol to help the youth as well?
Well, that's the other side of it. So as I talked about, there's the musical side, the business side, the marketing side, which I have, you know, all of the various skill sets come into play in order to support the audience development part of it. You know, and so it's basically starting with a product that or artistically unique product that's then associated with a brand. And so we've got a song or a suite or a commission piece associated with the brand of Sonic Portraits Orchestra Youth Ensemble. And then, you know, the next part of that is producing high quality productions. And so we say in the music business that people don't buy the music, they buy the brand. And so if the brand is associated with quality and with things that are enriching culturally, then it's easy to market, because then you've got the co-branding that you do with partners like the Jazz Institute or various donors. As you know, in nonprofit work, your partners become an important part of that outreach to the community, because they're not just partners, they are networks and people who are going to show up at events and tell their friends about it and their family and get excited about it. And then you've got the artists themselves, and especially young people. As we know, you know, most of the young people live out and hang out on Instagram, whereas our generation is more Facebook. And so you've got all these different networks, and so when the kids are excited about something, they communicate it in a whole different way, and their peer group responds to that. And so we need that. We need, you know, when I work with kids as much as possible, I try to make sure that their parents are aware and involved in what they're doing. So, you know, because the parents can get excited and bring that extra support to what we're doing. So a lot of times I will, you know, invite them to the rehearsals and have refreshments for the parents who bring the kids, you know, and make it comfortable for them to hang out and meet each other. And so you have this community kind of coming together and fusing, and it's all culminating to this event that then everybody shows up, and they're not strangers to each other. They're part of this community. So. Right,
Robert. We have only about 30 seconds left. Could you let our viewers know, parents, etc., if they want to become involved in the Sonic Portraits Orchestra Youth Ensemble, what should they do? Maybe how could they contact you? What are the next steps for someone very interested in music?
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking. So that's simple. Just Sonic Portraits Orchestra. So info@sonicportraitsorchestra.org.
Thank you so much, Robert.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you both.
I appreciate it. I wish we had more time.
Yes.
This is the D Tycoon Show. Thank you to our guest, Robert Irving III, and to Reverend Dr. Catherine Brown D. Tycoon. This is Trudy Leung, and I'm Bill Morton. Thank you so much.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.